Hey everybody, it's Jason from the Texas Gun Vault, and once again I'm coming to you with another range report. Well, today's range report really is more of a show and tell because the rifle that we have on the workbench today is an antique, and I don't really want to put it through its paces like I would a modern tactical firearm. I also only had 15 rounds of ammunition because this thing is chambered in .303 British, and that's just not a caliber that I keep on hand. So I really just want to share my thoughts and experiences with this really cool and historic rifle, and this rifle is the SMLE, the short magazine Lee-Enfield rifle, number 4, Mark 1. Now, this rifle has a lot of history to it. Now, this particular example was made in 1943, and of course, there are so many variants of this rifle. So, I am not an expert on these early 20th century bolt-action rifles, and if that's the type of information that you're looking for, two channels I would highly recommend you guys go check out is Forgotten Weapons and C&N Arsenal. Those guys know a lot about these, but I'm just here to get a chance to shoot this really historic rifle, give you guys my thoughts and express my opinions about it, and just kind of share this really cool experience that I have, because this is definitely not the type of rifle that I normally get to review. And before I talk about the things that I like and don't like and show you the little bit of footage that I have, I want to thank the person that lent this to the channel. He's a local subscriber named Ken. He also provided the ammunition. So Ken, thank you so much for giving me a chance to shoot your antique firearm and providing the ammunition so I can bring this content to everybody. So let's talk about what this rifle is. I've already told you it's the SMLE number 4 Mark 1, or the short magazine Lee-Enfield. Now, variations of this particular rifle have been in service since 1895. Now, it was the official British service rifle up until 1957. Yes, as so many other countries were adopting semi-automatic and full automatic rifles, the British Army still used this. Yeah, it's hard to believe. A bolt-action rifle. And in some circles, in some countries, and in some regiments for ceremonial purposes, this rifle is still in service today. So it has a storied tradition and a storied past, and it's still used by insurgents around the world. In some ways, it's kind of the bolt-action equivalent of the AK-47. And that's just because the British Empire had such an influence on so many parts of the world, and so many of these rifles were made that they just ended up in the hands of countries, insurgencies, and the like, and they're still out there, and our soldiers even encounter them in the battlefield today across the world. And that also speaks to the durability of these rifles. I mean, these things have been around for a long time, and they're not in current production. So these things are definitely a robust design that has stood the test of time. Now, I was doing a little bit of research on this rifle, and as I said, it's the number 4 Mark 1. However, the date of 1943 probably indicates that this is a Mark 1 star. Now, I don't know the exact differences, but it's not marked as that on this receiver. So maybe somebody that is a Lee-Enfield specialist can tell me which one it is. But according to the date, it should be a Mark 1 star, but this is just marked as a Mark 1. And as I also mentioned, this thing is chambered in kind of an odd caliber, the .303 British. It is a full-powered rifle cartridge that is rimmed. And originally this was a cartridge that was designed with black powder in mind that later was switched to smokeless powder. And because it is a rimmed cartridge, I think that's why this magazine has to be so short. As you guys know, rimmed cartridges don't stack well in magazines, and I think that's kind of its strength and its weakness. This rifle was also designed in a time when the battlefield was different. Of course, back then, they didn't really want to give soldiers all that much ammunition because it wasn't about putting down the suppressive firepower like it is today. Back then, it was one shot, one kill. That was the military philosophy, and you didn't go out and waste ammunition. The battlefield was very different than the modern one is today. So the philosophy of this gun is very different. But there's some things about this that I really like that I think carry over into modern rifles, and and that if the British had actually developed a semi-automatic version of this and changed the action but kept those certain features, they probably would have had a rifle that would have matched the M1 Garand. And we'll talk about my thoughts and opinions on that in just a minute. Now, Ken also lent a couple of other things to the channel that are really cool. He has an original military pouch, and in all of these pouches we have some of the original clips. And yes, this is a clip. Now, this gun you can load a number of different ways. You can use the clips, which I actually found were quite difficult, and I'll show some footage of that in a minute. You can also open the action. You can hand load it from the top, and it does have a removable magazine. Now, these are not as easy to get in and out of the rifle as modern rifles, but I think this is a huge advantage over some of its competitors that it saw on the battlefield. Many rifles did not have an easily removable magazine. Militaries thought this was something soldiers were going to lose. Now, compare that to today, where soldiers that carry many magazines, and getting those magazines in and out of the rifle is just something that they train with. But back then, that was not something that they trained for. So they really didn't want the soldiers to remove the magazine all that often, and that's why they used these clips. So that's something that's really interesting, and a feature of this rifle that I actually think is a little bit ahead of its time, because imagine if they would have created magazines that held more than 10 rounds, and that's all these magazines held. But that might have been an issue because of the 303 cartridge, of course, that is rimmed. But that is a really interesting feature. Oh yeah, and besides the pouch, he also has an original bayonet. And these things are really cool. If you're gonna have a cool historic rifle, you gotta have the bayonet for it. And it's a spike bayonet. And take a look at that. I really like how it goes on the rifle. It fixes on there pretty tight and secure. I should probably give you guys a close-up of this rifle as well. The wood on this is absolutely fantastic. It has been preserved pretty well. I do not know the history of it. Maybe it saw combat being made in 1943. This thing may have served somewhere in the world. So who knows what the story of this rifle is, and that's just something that's really neat when it comes to the vintage of these antique rifles. So now let's talk about the things that I like and don't like. And I think I've already alluded to a few of those. Number one, the history of this rifle. Now, this is not a video that goes in depth into that, but you guys should go watch some videos on the history and the development of this rifle, because they made millions of them and they served all around the world. And I just love guns that have that type of history and tradition, because honestly, I think human history is told through the gun, because these things have shaped politics and wars ever since firearms were designed. And so the guns that had the biggest impact have the biggest interest to me because of their storied past. This gun also, as I mentioned, is extremely well built, and that's why they survive to today. The action has been around for a long time. It has rear locking lugs. It feels robust. When you run this bolt, it feels tight. It feels solid. When you hold this thing, you're like, that is a gun. Very different than today's arms made with polymers and aluminum. This is wood and steel. I also told you that it has a removable magazine, and that's something that I really like about this. So I don't know why they wouldn't have issued soldiers more of these, but to me, this makes loading and unloading this gun way easier, and I think that is a huge advantage over many of its competitors and other rifles of its time. And lastly, I want to mention the ergonomics of this rifle. And yes, this is very different than the modern rifles, but when you hold this thing, it really seems like it is well balanced, and it shoulders really well. It's a very comfortable rifle for me to hold and to shoot. So holding it here on the workbench, it really does feel good for what it is. Now, obviously, modern ergonomics are a little bit better, but for a gun that is over 120 years old, It feels really good. But now let's talk about a couple of things about this rifle that I don't like. And one of them is the bolt and the handle for the bolt. It is bent. Now, I have seen some documentaries on various rifles about the shape of the bolt and why the handles are the way that they are. Many times military rifles had a straight handle on them, and I kind of prefer that. When this handle is down like this, I find it's a little bit slower and a little bit less accurate to charge the weapon and to chamber the next round. I like it when those bolts are straight out. But I know various rifles and manufacturers had different philosophies on that. There were some that did have that straight handle, and then as people would sporterize them, they would actually bend them down for civilian use. But personally, I like it if the handle on a bolt action is straight out. I can just reach it a little bit better. And the last thing, of course, is the capacity. But I shouldn't really ding it because, as I said, it was a gun built in a different time. But imagine if the philosophy of use of this gun was different and they had 20, 25, or even 30 round magazines, which might be impractical with a rimmed cartridge like the 303. Imagine the type of suppressive firepower the British Army could have had, and I think these would have been even more effective than what they were. All right, so let's get this thing to the range. As I said, I only have 15 rounds, so I did this in 5-round increments. So the first 5 rounds is just to shoot. I have never shot one of these before. Never shot a Lee-Enfield and never shot anything in 303 British. So I just want to shoot 5 rounds through it. Just make sure that it functions, it's not going to blow up, and just get my initial impressions. So let's see what happens. And shooting this thing really surprised me. Number one, it's definitely a very powerful rifle, which is what I would expect from a rifle of this era. But it doesn't really have a lot of kick. You feel it almost in the concussion of it, but it doesn't really come back into your shoulder that hard. And the thing I was most surprised about was the tone of the rifle. This thing sounded really deep. Maybe it's because I'm just used to intermediate cartridges, which have a higher pitch. This thing had more of a boom and not a crash. It was very interesting sound. And even when I've shot rifles that are chambered in 308, I wasn't getting that type of tone. Now, when it did come to loading this particular gun, I did find that the clips are kind of difficult to maneuver. You can load them, you have the little slot in the back where they go, but a couple of times I was having some trouble getting the rounds in. Now, granted, I am not an expert in this. This is not the type of rifle that I normally shoot, and I am sure that I am missing something, and there's some types of tricks of the trade to make this more efficient. I actually found that hand loading this was a little bit easier than using the clips. But I tried a number of different clips and I had kind of the same issue with inserting the rounds into the magazine. And I'm curious if anybody else has a rifle like this. What do you guys think? What is the trick to doing that effectively and quick? And I've seen videos of people doing it quick and effective, and I wasn't able to do that. But granted, as I said, this is my very first time shooting this particular rifle. So I would love to know, and you guys can share that information with me. All right, so now I'm going to set the target a little bit further at about 20 yards. And yes, I know this rifle can go out to 300, 400, and 500 yards. But because I only had 15 rounds for this thing, I just wanted to get the experience of it. We're just at a 25-yard range today. But I'm going to shoot this thing at 20 yards and see if I discover anything else about this rifle that I like or don't like. And obviously I was going for the head on that silhouette target, and this rifle is exceptionally accurate. And I have to say, running the action on this gun feels really good. It is really, really smooth. Yeah, it feels great, and that just goes back to the construction and the design. So I'm not having any hang-ups with that bolt at all. I think I've only had one round that didn't fully eject, and you guys saw that I had to dump it. I think it was in the first shooting footage. Besides that, it's been running great, and it's just so cool to experience this rifle and to get to shoot it. All right, so the last 5 rounds, I'm just gonna bench rest it, set up another target as far as I can at this range, and I'm going to expect the tightest grip possible. So let me just shoot 5 more rounds through this thing, bench resting, and then I'll give you guys my final thoughts. And as you can see, for me, this rifle shoots great. And man, is it so much fun. And it's really awesome to get to hold and shoot a piece of history, because that's what this thing is. So what are my final thoughts on the Lee-Enfield No. 4 Mark 1? Well, this is one of the coolest rifles I have ever shot and reviewed here on the channel. And I do apologize that I am not an expert like other people are on these older antique bolt action rifles. But I still felt it would be good for me to do a range report on this and just kind of talk about my initial impressions as an average gun guy and somebody that can really respect these rifles and appreciate them, because I definitely do. I just feel the history that comes with shooting one of these. I understand why it has the reputation that it does. And I understand why our soldiers still find these on the battlefield, because they're so well built and so robust. To be very honest with you, out of all of the antique firearms I've shot, this one might be my favorite, with the only exception being the original Russian SKS. But when it comes to all the other ones, the M1 Garands and the like, this one might be my favorite. This one shoots so well, it's so much fun, it has a different sound to it, it has a really cool look, and has a great history. So I have really no issues with it, and just getting to hold it, I have grown to really appreciate what this rifle is. And this is gonna have to go on my list of guns that I really kind of want to collect for a future Milsurp collection. And while I know there's people out there that have to collect all the different variants and all the different marks, for me, I would just want one. But this one kind of fits the bill. Yeah, you got that bayonet, it has the right look, it has the right time period on it from World War II, it has the right everything. This thing is just so cool. And even though I kind of feel like if the military generals of the time would have understood more modern concepts of warfare, they could have turned this rifle into something even greater. But as it sits, it is pretty darn awesome and really a piece of history. So on my star system, I just got to give it 5 out of 5 stars, just because it's so cool and so historic and so interesting to me. I absolutely loved the opportunity to get to shoot this. It was fantastic, so much fun. I wish I had some more ammunition for it, but on the other hand, this gun being so old, I'm kind of glad I didn't shoot it too much because I really want this gun to be preserved for future generations. So what do you guys think? Do you guys own any Lee-Enfield rifles? What do you think? Does your experiences mirror mine? Do you think these things are really cool? And do you have a collection of these? And once again, if you can help me with knowing how to load from a stripper clip into this to be more effective, let me know. I tried a few things and I wasn't too successful. Well, I wasn't quick with it. But anyway, let me know in the comments section below, and thank you, Ken, for lending this to the channel. So, as always, thanks for watching.